Does your mother-in-law fix your recipes or rearrange your furniture when you're not home? You're experiencing boundary violations that damage family relationships, and you're not being too sensitive about it. My 6-month investigation with family therapists and struggling couples revealed surprising psychological patterns behind these seemingly innocent interferences. The research uncovered why these behaviors create such deep resentment and how they systematically undermine parental authority and spousal relationships. Most importantly, I discovered effective techniques to address these issues before they escalate into irreparable family rifts. Stay with me. This understanding will transform how you perceive and respond to every interaction with your in-laws going forward. Grandma's special cookies, a sweet beginning. Picture this, a warm kitchen filled with the smell of fresh-baked cookies. Martha, my mother-in-law, humming some old tune as she pulls a tray from the oven, her face literally glowing with pride. Classic Martha. Every Sunday afternoon, like clockwork, she's at our house for her sacred grandma time, which always involves baking. The soft crackle of parchment paper and gentle ticking of the vintage wall clock create that familiar Sunday atmosphere we've all come to expect. Martha is an enthusiastic grandmother, the kind who buys presents 3 months before birthdays and keeps a special drawer at her house filled with toys that are too noisy for Mom and Dad's house. My kids think she hung the moon. And honestly, most of the time, I'm grateful they have a grandmother who loves them so fiercely. But there's something about the way Martha bakes that's always made me uncomfortable. It's the little glances over her shoulder when she thinks I'm not looking. The secretive way she adds ingredients when the kids aren't paying attention. Like right now, I'm pretending to load the dishwasher, but in the reflection of the microwave door, I can see her slipping something into the mixing bowl, quickly covering it with flour before anyone notices. Grandma, are the cookies almost ready? My 7-year-old Emma bounces around the kitchen island, her younger brother trailing behind her like a shadow. Almost, sweethearts. And trust me, these are going to be much better than Mommy's cookies. Martha winks at them conspiratorially. Grandma knows the real way to make chocolate chip cookies. The secret's in how you mix them. I feel something twist in my stomach. It's the better than Mommy's part. The way she says it, like we're competitors for my children's approval rather than teammates in raising them. I bet they'll be amazing, Martha, I say, trying to keep my voice light. What's your secret ingredient today? She laughs, that tinkling laugh that somehow always sounds a little hollow to me. Oh, just a grandmother's love. Nothing you can buy in stores. The timer dings, and suddenly it's a whirlwind of activity. Martha placing cookies on the cooling rack, the kids hovering like little vultures, me pouring milk into their favorite cups. I watch their faces as they take their first bites, lighting up with genuine delight. These are better than Mommy's, Emma declares, chocolate smeared across her cheek. Can you teach Mom how to make them like this, Grandma? Martha beams. Some people just have the touch, sweetheart. Your mom is good at other things. Another subtle dig, wrapped in a compliment, delivered with a smile. These tiny paper cuts that sting but seem too small to mention. I'm about to change the subject when I notice something. A small red patch forming on my 5-year-old Noah's cheek. Then another on his neck. My mom radar goes into immediate overdrive. Noah, honey, let me see your face. I tilt his chin toward me, my heart starting to pound as I see the rash spreading. He's fine, Martha waves dismissively. Kids get rosy when they're excited. But I'm already opening the cabinet where we keep the children's Benadryl. Noah, does your throat feel funny? Is it itchy anywhere? Maybe a little, he admits, scratching at his neck. Martha rolls her eyes dramatically for the kids' benefit. Oh, it's just a tiny bit of nuts. They need to build up tolerance. My Robert ate peanut butter every day as a child and never had a problem. The bottle of Benadryl nearly slips from my hand. You put nuts in these? Martha, we've talked about this. Noah has a mild nut allergy. Mild is the key word, she says, as if explaining something to a particularly slow student. How will he ever outgrow it if you're so overprotective? I measure out the medication with shaking hands, helping Noah drink it while keeping my voice calm. That's not how allergies work, and you know it. Emma's bottom lip trembles. She hates conflict, especially between her mom and grandma. Martha puts her arm around Emma's shoulders. Your mom overreacts about everything, she stage whispers. Noah is perfectly fine. Look at him. Noah is indeed looking better already, the medication working quickly. But that's not the point. Kids, why don't you go watch some TV while I clean up in here? I suggest. Once they've left, I turn to face Martha, who's already wiping down counters as if nothing happened. We need to talk about what just happened, I say quietly. Nothing happened, she responds without looking at me, except you turning a tiny rash into World War III. You deliberately put an ingredient in food that you know Noah reacts to, after we've specifically discussed his allergy multiple times. Martha sighs dramatically. It was just a little bit of almond extract, barely a drop. And look, he's fine. The pattern we've danced through for years, the boundary crossed, the dismissal of my concerns, the rewriting of reality until I'm the unreasonable one. Did my mother-in-law really cause a family crisis over cookies? Yes, and trust me, it wasn't about the cookies at all. It never is. The cookies are just the battlefield where something much more important is being contested. My authority as a parent. The secret ingredient, control. Those cookies had a secret ingredient that wasn't listed in any recipe book, pure, undiluted control. And here's the weird thing about control seekers like Martha, they don't even realize they're doing it half the time. The need to assert dominance is baked into their behavior just as surely as those nuts were baked into my son's cookies. So what actually drives someone like my mother-in-law to deliberately ignore clear instructions about something as simple as a cookie recipe? A split screen would tell the whole story. On one side, there's Martha smugly sprinkling chopped almonds into the batter while whispering, "I know best." And on the other side, there's me, clearly explaining Noah's allergy situation weeks earlier. Think of it like a chess match. Each cookie represents a move to establish dominance on the family board. What we're seeing here is a classic example of food preparation being used as a dominance behavior, says Dr. Elaine Foster, a family therapist I interviewed for this video. In many family systems, especially intergenerational ones, food becomes currency in a complex exchange of power and control. Recent studies show that 68% of family conflicts involve disagreements over traditions or routines in the home. Dr. Foster explains that when someone like Martha insists on changing recipes against explicit instructions, they're making a statement, "My knowledge trumps yours. My experience matters more. My way is the right way." This pattern didn't start with cookies, though. Looking back, I can spot the same behavior everywhere. Like the time Martha rearranged our living room furniture while helping me clean, because it flowed better her way. Or when she returned the blue sweater I'd picked for Emma's birthday and replaced it with a pink one because girls should wear feminine colors. Or my personal favorite, when she decided Noah's afternoon nap schedule was too rigid and let him stay up until he had a complete meltdown. Each of these seemingly helpful improvements follows the same pattern Dr. Foster points out as we review these incidents. They all fundamentally undermine your authority as a parent and homemaker. They're all statements that say, "My way is better than yours," without ever having to speak those words directly. During these control episodes, the brain's pleasure centers activate. Our animation shows this process. The brain receives a satisfaction reward through dopamine release whenever someone overrides another's decisions. Martha might genuinely believe she's being helpful while her brain enjoys each instance of decision-making dominance. This is rarely conscious, Dr. Foster emphasizes. In an enmeshed family system, parents often control their children through emotional manipulation, which can last well into adulthood. This type of control happens because parents become so reliant on their children for emotional support that they consciously or unconsciously prevent them from achieving personal growth. But here's where the story gets complicated and a bit more sympathetic toward Martha. When we dig into her history, we discover she was subjected to the exact same treatment by her own mother-in-law. For 20 years, she endured Margaret's helpful suggestions about how to raise Robert, how to clean her house, how to dress, how to cook. She swore she'd never be that kind of mother-in-law, yet here she is, repeating the exact same patterns. Patterns of behavior that indicate control issues, as opposed to genuine helpfulness, often involve a disregard for established boundaries and a subtle undermining of autonomy, explains Dr. Foster. This includes questioning decisions, offering unsolicited advice, or inserting themselves into situations where they are not welcome. When I asked Martha why she felt the need to add nuts to the cookies, despite knowing about Noah's allergy, her answer was revealing. A little exposure builds immunity. My mother-in-law taught me that, and all my kids turned out fine. She's defending her identity as a mother and grandmother. She's defending her relevance in a family where her role has diminished. Research shows that in-laws often change things in their adult children's homes to maintain influence over family decisions. This stems from their past role as primary caregivers and manifests as a need to feel important within the family, especially after their child marries. Emotional manipulation is a common tactic used by in-laws to exert control, often disguised as care or concern, notes Dr. Foster. These manipulative behaviors undermine the couple's confidence in their choices and prioritize the mother-in-law's needs over the couple's well-being. So what was the real secret ingredient in those cookies? It was Martha's deep-seated need to assert dominance and undermine my parental authority. The cookies were merely the vehicle for a potent message. I still matter. I know better than you, and I'll prove it however I can. The most troubling part? Martha genuinely believes she's acting out of love. She'd be horrified if someone suggested she was trying to control the family. In her mind, she's sharing wisdom and tradition. She's being helpful. She's showing love the only way she knows how. But love doesn't disregard clear boundaries. Love doesn't put a child at risk. Love doesn't need to prove itself by asserting dominance. That's the bitter truth at the center of this sweet-seeming situation. From cookies to power plays. When Martha replaced my chocolate chips with walnuts, she wasn't just baking cookies. She was staking a claim. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how the person who controls the food often controls the family? Your kitchen might actually be the most politically charged room in your entire house. Anthropologists have studied this phenomenon for years. That simmering pot on the stove represents a battlefield where authority gets established one recipe at a time. I watched it play out in my own kitchen last month when my mother came to visit while Martha was there. 3 generations of women, all circling the mixing bowl like strategists around a war room table, each of us maneuvering for the right to decide what normal means in our family. Picture the scene. My mother confidently reaching for the vanilla, Martha swooping in with a helpful suggestion about using almond extract instead, and me stuck in the middle, wondering when making a simple batch of snickerdoodles turned into Game of Thrones kitchen edition. Every suggestion, every pinch of salt, every "that's not how we do it" became a tactical move on this culinary chessboard. In family settings, everyday activities like cooking and food preparation can become contested territory in power struggles, explains Dr. Samantha Webb, family psychologist. The kitchen often serves as a battleground for authority, particularly in the relationships between mothers and mothers-in-law. Martha's tactics are fascinating if you know what to look for. She doesn't storm in and take over. That would be too obvious. Instead, she orchestrates a symphony of subtle moves. Is that really enough cinnamon? Or in my day, we sifted the flour 3 times. My personal favorite was when she took a bite of my lasagna, smiled tightly and said, "It's interesting," before offering to show me her foolproof recipe next time. As I observed these interactions, I began to see patterns that extended beyond just cooking disagreements. Dr. Webb identifies this as kitchen territory marking, a common form of female-to-female dominance behavior. Control over food preparation becomes a symbolic representation of broader authority issues within the family, she explains. The kitchen, as a central space for nurturing and tradition, often becomes a site where different generations and family members vie for influence. On screen, we see an animation of these small acts creating ripples through family dynamics. Each critical comment or recipe improvement chips away at the mother's confidence and authority. Death by 1,000 cookie cutters. This pattern repeats across different domains of family life. Our comparison chart pops up on screen showing similar power plays in other areas like child discipline, holiday traditions, and home decoration. The psychologist points out that these behaviors form a comprehensive strategy to reshape family norms. What we're seeing in the reconstructed scene with 3 generations in the kitchen is a dramatization of how seemingly simple acts, such as baking cookies, become a means of asserting control and defining what's normal within the family. Last Thanksgiving exemplified this kitchen power struggle perfectly. Martha arrived 2 days early to help prepare. Within hours, she'd rearranged my spice rack alphabetically. I had it organized by frequency of use, suggested my turkey roasting pan was inadequate, and somehow managed to misplace my grandmother's handwritten stuffing recipe, replacing it with her own version. By dinner time, I felt like a guest in my own kitchen. When my daughter asked me where the cranberry sauce was, Martha answered before I could open my mouth. "I put it in the blue dish, sweetheart. Mommy's crystal bowl was too small." Reflecting on that moment later, I realized how masterfully Martha had outmaneuvered me on my own culinary territory. This observation aligns perfectly with Dr. Webb's analysis. This isn't just about food. It's about who has the authority to make decisions and establish norms. When someone consistently overrides another person's choices in their own domain, they're making a statement about hierarchy and power. What makes this dynamic so insidious is how easily it's disguised as helpfulness or tradition. Martha isn't trying to be malicious. In her mind, she's sharing wisdom and improving things. That's what makes addressing it so complicated. You can't exactly blow up at someone for suggesting you add more vanilla to the cake batter. The animation shows how these small acts accumulate over time like water dripping on a rock, eventually carving a canyon in family power dynamics. For children caught in this power struggle, the messages can be confusing. When Emma sees her grandmother override my decisions in the kitchen, she's learning something about authority and whose rules really matter. The question of who gets to decide what goes into the cookies becomes a question of who gets to decide, period. When manipulation wears a love costume, the battle for control doesn't always march in wearing combat boots. Sometimes it slips in wearing a cardigan and carrying freshly baked cookies. Ever notice how the most manipulative people in your family are often the ones who claim they're just showing how much they care? There's a psychological sleight of hand happening that's worth unpacking. Let me introduce you to something psychologists call emotional blackmail. Like a venomous compliment, it delivers control tactics wrapped in a pretty package labeled love or concern. This manipulation thrives in family settings because challenging someone's caring intentions makes you seem ungrateful, especially when it's grandma who's devoted to her grandbabies. Consider Janet from Ohio, who we interviewed among several mothers-in-law. She smiles warmly at the camera. "Sometimes my daughter-in-law gets upset when I buy the kids ice cream before dinner, but I only see them once a week. I love them so much I can't help myself." Behind me, our family therapist, Dr. Lisa Chen, is practically climbing out of her chair. Her analysis cuts through the sweetness. What we're seeing here is a masterclass in emotional manipulation, Dr. Chen explains. These statements sound innocent but contain hidden weapons. When someone uses "I love them so much" as justification for ignoring clear boundaries, they're establishing their emotions as more important than the parent's rules. The screen shows Martha smiling broadly while saying, "I just want what's best for the children," as she slips them candy after their parents said no. Dr. Chen points to this evidence. "This is textbook emotional blackmail," she continues. The manipulator creates a narrative where their love is the hero and anyone questioning them becomes the villain. It works because who wants to oppose love? Dr. Chen explains that emotional blackmail leverages flattery or threats to trigger feelings of obligation. When the target complies, she says, they receive temporary kindness or approval. But they've taught the manipulator that the tactic works, setting up future episodes. The animation shows how this cycle perpetuates. Boundary crossing, claims of loving intentions, confusion and guilt, giving in, reinforcement, repeat. Watch for these red flags, Dr. Chen cautions as phrases appear on screen. "If you loved me, you'd let me," whispered after a boundary is set. "I only did it because I care so much," offered as justification for interference. "Nobody loves these children more than I do," declared to establish superior authority. These statements create confusion and guilt, Dr. Chen emphasizes. They make it nearly impossible to maintain boundaries without feeling like the bad guy. The animation shifts to show how these tactics affect the brain. When someone hears manipulative phrases, emotional centers light up, often overriding logical parts that might otherwise detect the manipulation. Defending against emotional blackmail is difficult because the manipulator deliberately blurs the line between genuine care and controlling behavior. Dr. Chen explains, "Your brain receives conflicting signals. This person says they love me, but their actions make me feel awful." We see footage of a mother explaining to her children why they can't have grandma's secret candy. The children appear confused. If grandma loves them, why would she do something bad? Children are particularly vulnerable to this manipulation, Dr. Chen notes. They lack the cognitive tools to understand that someone can both love them and manipulate them. This creates deeply confusing messages about relationships and boundaries. Another destructive tactic is the invalidation of feelings. Dr. Chen describes how manipulative family members dismiss legitimate concerns. When a mother-in-law says, "You're overreacting about important issues," she's making the other person believe their emotions aren't valid. The screen shows Martha rolling her eyes when her daughter-in-law expresses concern about a nut allergy, saying, "You worry too much." Over time, Dr. Chen explains, this invalidation leads people to doubt their own instincts, making them more vulnerable to manipulation. We see Martha becoming cold when her suggestions aren't followed. Dr. Chen identifies this as withholding affection. When manipulators only show kindness when you comply with their wishes, that's conditioning, not love, she explains. They're training you like you might train a dog. This often involves isolation tactics like the silent treatment. In in-law relationships, the implied threat is powerful, Dr. Chen notes. If you don't do things my way, I might withhold approval or affection from your children. Manipulators blur these lines deliberately to avoid accountability. When confronted, they'll say, "Everything I do is because I love you," Dr. Chen explains. This creates cognitive dissonance. The behavior feels wrong, but the stated intention sounds right. Most people resolve this by red flags flying, spotting boundary bulldozers. That guilt trip might feel like a casual Sunday drive, but it's actually the first stop on a much longer journey of manipulation. Family therapists have seen it all, from the harmless eccentric aunt who collects spoons to the grandmother who systematically rewrites your parenting playbook when you're not looking. The difference? One's quirky, the other's dangerous. And most of us have been conditioned our entire lives to ignore the warning signs. Let me introduce Dr. Rachel Winters, a family psychologist with 20 years of experience navigating the murky waters of toxic family dynamics. Most people struggle to identify boundary violations because they've been taught that family gets special privileges, she explains as we sit down in her office filled with family photos. They mistake control for caring. Dr. Winters points to a case study displayed on her screen, a dramatization of a seemingly innocent grandparent pickup scenario. Here's Grandma Janet arriving unannounced at school to pick up her grandson Tyler, she narrates as the scene unfolds. When the teacher mentions she's not on the approved pickup list, Janet insists there must be a mistake and that she's picked Tyler up many times before. The screen splits to show the mother's frantic text messages as she discovers her son isn't at after-school care. This is warning sign number 1, consistently forgetting clearly stated rules, Dr. Winters explains. Janet was explicitly told she wasn't authorized for pickup, but she created an emergency situation that centered her desires over established boundaries. The most insidious aspect of boundary violations is how they make you question your own perceptions. When someone repeatedly ignores your stated preferences, they're not being forgetful, Dr. Winters emphasizes. They're sending a clear message that your rules are optional and their judgment supersedes yours. Dr. Winters identifies other warning signs, like creating situations where saying no makes you look like the villain, such as buying children a puppy after parents said no pets. This tactic weaponizes children's emotions against the parents, she explains. The boundary crosser becomes the hero while forcing the parent into the role of the bad guy, undermining parental authority and teaching children that boundaries are negotiable. In our research, parents described the emotional whiplash of these situations. One mother told us, "My mother-in-law would wait until I left the room to give my toddler soda in a sippy cup. When confronted, she'd say, 'One little treat from grandma won't hurt.' But it was about the pattern of going behind my back." This reveals warning sign number 3, the covert operation. Dr. Winters explains, when family members specifically wait until you're absent to break your rules, they're demonstrating they know exactly what they're doing. The secrecy reveals their awareness that the behavior is unacceptable. The invalidation of feelings proves particularly damaging. When a family member dismisses your concerns or reprimands you for showing emotion, they're employing a manipulation tactic designed to make you believe your feelings don't matter, eroding your self-worth over time. When someone says you're being too sensitive after violating a boundary, they're attempting to make the problem your reaction rather than their behavior, Dr. Winters notes. The screen shows a grandmother telling her son one version of events while telling her daughter-in-law something completely different. Warning sign number 4 is triangulation, Dr. Winters points out. It's like a chess master playing 2 opponents simultaneously with different strategies. By deliberately creating conflict through different stories, the manipulator maintains control of the game board, preventing a united front from forming against them. What makes boundary violations difficult to address is that they come disguised as love. In an enmeshed family system, children meet their parents' emotional needs rather than developing autonomy. A healthy family offers support when needed but gives space, Dr. Winters explains. An enmeshed family blurs all boundaries, making independent identity development nearly impossible. Boundary bulldozing often appears subtle. The eye roll when you mention your parenting approach, helpfully rearranging your kitchen cabinets, comments about, "In my day, we didn't worry about such things." These acts build into a pattern undermining your authority. The difference between a quirky in-law and a boundary bulldozer lies in the pattern and response to correction, Dr. Winters emphasizes. When confronted, do they apologize and adjust, or deflect, deny, or double down? The latter indicates a fundamental disregard for boundaries unlikely to improve without significant intervention. Dr. Winters offers this litmus test. Supportive family members offer help and accept your decision either way. Controlling family members insist on their way and make you feel guilty for declining. The first respects your autonomy. The second prioritizes their desires over your boundaries. After reviewing hundreds of cases, Dr. Winters concludes, the most damaging boundary violations are the consistent, low-grade dismissals of your authority that become normalized, eroding parental confidence not with a wrecking ball, but with a persistent drip of undermining actions. When food becomes a weapon. Those persistent drips of boundary violations, Dr. Winters described, can become a dangerous flood when food enters the picture. That seemingly innocent moment when a relative says a little won't hurt while secretly adding an ingredient you've explicitly banned? This is a form of medical gaslighting that experts now recognize as abuse. And the psychological damage can last far longer than any physical reaction. I spoke with Dr. Amelia Rodriguez, an immunologist specializing in pediatric allergies, who explained why that just a little mentality is so dangerous. What many people don't understand is that allergic reactions can become progressively worse with each exposure. A mild rash today could become anaphylaxis tomorrow. When someone deliberately exposes a child to an allergen, they're gambling with potentially fatal consequences. Family gatherings present particular risks for those with food allergies. According to a survey by the Food Allergy Research and Education Organization, 32% of severe allergic reactions requiring emergency care happened at these events. In nearly half of those cases, the person serving the food knew about the allergy, but either didn't believe it was real or thought they were helping by building tolerance. This was exactly the case with Martha's exposure builds immunity philosophy. But Dr. Rodriguez is clear, that's dangerous pseudoscience. Food allergies must be managed under strict medical supervision, not by grandma's kitchen experiments. When I showed Dr. Yasmin Khan, a clinical psychologist, the footage of Martha dismissing concerns about Noah's rash, she immediately identified it as medical gaslighting. This is where someone systematically denies or distorts another person's medical experiences, causing them to question their own reality. It's particularly harmful when directed at children who are still developing their sense of bodily autonomy. Dr. Khan explained that children exposed to this pattern learn dangerous lessons. When trusted adults tell them their physical symptoms aren't real or are exaggerated, children stop trusting their own bodies. They may ignore warning signs of serious reactions in the future or feel unable to speak up when they're experiencing symptoms. Attorney Michael Brownstein, who specializes in family law, explained that knowingly exposing someone to an allergen against their will can constitute assault in certain jurisdictions. If a person deliberately gives someone food containing an allergen they know could cause harm, and that person suffers a significant reaction, there could be criminal charges. I've seen cases where restraining orders were issued against family members who repeatedly ignored food restrictions. This legal reality conflicts sharply with the family knows best mentality that many boundary crossers cling to. Brownstein described several cases where grandparents claimed they had the right to feed their grandchildren whatever they wanted, only to face serious legal consequences when allergic reactions sent children to the emergency room. 9-year-old Zoe's experience exemplifies this conflict. Her grandmother repeatedly gave her cookies containing eggs despite her allergy. During a family therapy session I observed Zoe explained, "I don't want to make Grandma sad by not eating her cookies, but I also don't want my throat to get itchy and scary." What makes food boundary violations particularly damaging is how they force children to choose between physical safety and emotional connections to beloved family members. This creates a terrible precedent, Dr. Khan noted. Children learn that maintaining relationships sometimes requires enduring physical harm or discomfort, a dangerous lesson that can shape their future relationships. For parents, these situations create impossible choices. Melissa, mother of a 5-year-old with severe dairy allergies, said, "I have to inspect every plate before my son eats. My mother-in-law thinks I'm being controlling, but after she secretly gave him a taste of real ice cream and we spent the night in the ER, I don't trust her anymore." James, father to a daughter with celiac disease, described the emotional toll. The worst part isn't even the constant vigilance, it's the betrayal. When someone who claims to love your child deliberately puts them at risk because they think they know better, that breaks something fundamental in your relationship. Lauren, whose mother repeatedly forgot about her son's peanut allergy, finally reached her breaking point after 3 separate reactions. "I told my mom she could either respect our medical decisions completely or she wouldn't be alone with him anymore. She accused me of using her grandson as a weapon against her, completely missing that she was using peanut butter as a weapon against him." Food tampering in families is rarely about the food itself. Dr. Khan explained that it typically represents control, authority, and a fundamental lack of respect for boundaries. When someone deliberately ignores food restrictions, what they're really saying is, "I don't believe you," or "My desires matter more than your safety." It's a profound violation of trust masked as care or affection. Inside the mind of a boundary crosser, family members who repeatedly cross boundaries aren't just forgetting your rules, they're actively rewriting them in their heads. Inside Martha's mind, those 5 times she forgot about Noah's food restrictions weren't acts of defiance. They were heroic rescues from what she considered your overprotective parenting. The scary part? She genuinely believed she was doing the right thing. Let's peek behind the curtain of a boundary crosser's mind. When Martha slips Noah that cookie with nuts, her internal monologue runs deep. These modern parents worry too much about everything. A little exposure builds immunity. I raised Robert without these restrictions and he turned out perfectly fine. Noah's rash last time wasn't even that bad. They'll thank me when he outgrows this allergy because of my help. Dr. Vanessa Thompson, a clinical psychologist specializing in family dynamics, explains that this rewiring happens almost instantly. In the boundary crosser's mind, they create what we call a justification narrative that allows them to violate rules while still viewing themselves as good people. They genuinely believe they're helping, not harming. On screen, we see an animation of Martha's thought process as she bakes those infamous cookies. Little thought bubbles pop up showing her mental gymnastics. They're being too cautious. I raised 3 kids without all these rules. Noah's rash last time wasn't even that bad. They'll thank me later when he outgrows this allergy. The animation zooms out to show Martha's brain with the pleasure centers lighting up as she makes these decisions. There's actually a dopamine reward when someone exercises what they perceive as parental wisdom, Dr. Thompson continues. They're chasing that feeling of being needed, being right, being the authority. For many chronic boundary crossers, profound fear drives these behaviors. What we're really seeing is the anxiety of irrelevance, says Dr. Thompson. As parents age out of their primary caregiver role, they experience an identity crisis. Who am I, if not the ultimate authority on child rearing? What's my value if my adult children don't need my guidance anymore? This is where entitled grandparent syndrome enters the picture. This psychological pattern describes grandparents who believe their experience gives them special rights that override parental authority. They don't see themselves as disrespecting boundaries. They believe they have an inherent right to make decisions about their grandchildren. In their minds, they've earned the right to override you, explains Dr. Thompson. They raise children successfully, so they believe their experience trumps your authority. The cookies, or bedtime rules, represent maintaining their position in the family hierarchy. These patterns don't appear out of nowhere. They're often passed down through generations like unwanted family heirlooms. The camera pans to Martha's own childhood photos, showing her grandmother sneaking her candy against her mother's wishes. Then to Martha as a young mother, with her mother-in-law Margaret rearranging her kitchen and criticizing her parenting. We see generational patterns of control in almost every family system, Dr. Thompson observes. Martha experienced boundary violations from her own mother-in-law, so she believes this is just how family relationships work. She's repeating behaviors that were modeled for her. The animation shows a family tree with thought bubbles at each generation. Mother knows best, grandmother knows better, great-grandmother knows even better. It's a cycle that keeps spinning unless someone deliberately breaks it. The boundary crosser often has no awareness of what they're doing, adds Dr. Thompson. If you asked Martha if she was trying to undermine your authority, she'd be genuinely shocked and hurt. In her mind, she's being helpful, loving, and wise. This lack of self-awareness makes addressing the behavior challenging. For Martha, sneaking nuts into Noah's cookies isn't malice. It's what she sees as a loving correction to overprotective parenting. The control is about reclaiming relevance in a world where her parenting wisdom feels increasingly ignored. Through interviews with reformed boundary crossers, we hear illuminating confessions. I honestly thought I was helping, admits one grandmother. It took me years to understand that when I ignored my daughter-in-law's rules, I was actually telling her that I didn't respect her as a parent. Dr. Thompson emphasizes that understanding this psychology doesn't excuse the behavior. Recognizing that boundary violations often come from insecurity rather than malice gives us a starting point. But understanding doesn't mean accepting behaviors that undermine parental authority or put children at risk. The key lies in recognizing the fear behind the control. For Martha, the fear is becoming irrelevant in her grandchildren's lives. When we address the fear rather than just the behavior, we often see more lasting change, Dr. Thompson explains. Simply setting firmer boundaries without acknowledging the emotional needs driving the tap behavior usually leads to more resistance, not less. The family free pass phenomenon. The bizarre double standard we all put up with when it comes to family would be criminal in any other relationship. Imagine your neighbor barging into your home, reorganizing your kitchen cabinets, and telling you how to raise your kids. You'd probably have the cops on speed dial. But when Aunt Edith or Grandma Martha pulls the exact same move, we roll our eyes and mutter that 5-word relationship killer. That's just how they are. What gives family members this magical immunity to normal social rules? I sat down with Dr. Helena Jordan, a sociologist who spent 15 years studying family dynamics to understand this weird phenomenon she calls the family free pass. Dr. Jordan showed me footage from a fascinating social experiment. "Watch this split-screen video," she said as we observed participants reacting to boundary violations. One side showed people nearly having a meltdown when a stranger rearranged their desk. The other side showed the same people merely sighing in resignation when their mother did the identical thing. One participant actually apologized to her mother for having too much clutter after mom reorganized her entire desk drawer system without asking. "Most people have two completely different rule books," Dr. Jordan explained. Then she revealed something surprising. When family members cross boundaries, the brain actually processes it through different neural networks than when strangers commit identical violations. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, simply doesn't activate the same way with family. This biological programming makes sense evolutionarily. Our ancestors depended on family units for survival, so maintaining harmony within the clan often outweighed individual boundaries. Challenging a parent or elder could mean being cast out, essentially a death sentence in prehistoric times. What's fascinating is how this ancient wiring persists, despite our modern social conditions. We're running outdated survival software that makes us tolerate things from family we'd never accept from others. Cultural factors amplify this effect. In many societies with strong filial piety traditions, questioning an elder's actions is seen as deeply disrespectful. The family unit is paramount, and individual comfort is subordinated to group harmony. Even in Western cultures, we're surrounded by messages about family sanctity. Blood is thicker than water. Family comes first. These cultural mantras create powerful guilt mechanisms that activate whenever we consider enforcing boundaries with relatives. This family-free pass carries serious consequences. I spoke with several people who endured years of boundary violations from family members, believing they had no choice. "I let my mother-in-law criticize my parenting for 7 years," said Rebecca, a 38-year-old mother of 2. "She'd constantly undermine my rules in front of the kids, showing up unannounced and taking over my kitchen. I kept making excuses. She means well, she's just old school, that's just how she is. But I was having panic attacks before her visits. My marriage and relationship with my kids were suffering." The family free pass creates a self-reinforcing cycle. Each time we excuse a boundary violation, we train family members that their behavior is acceptable. The boundaries erode, the violations grow bolder, and resentment builds. "The cost is enormous," explained Dr. Taylor Chen, a family therapist specializing in toxic family dynamics. "I see patients with anxiety disorders, depression, and even PTSD symptoms from prolonged exposure to boundary violations within families. The emotional distress is often compounded by guilt, feeling like a bad child for being upset." Dr. Chen's case files show people tolerate family boundary violations for an average of 12 years before taking action. By then, the relationship damage is severe. Enabling boundary violations doesn't preserve relationships, it destroys them, Dr. Chen said. When resentment builds silently for years, it eventually reaches a breaking point. That's when estrangement happens. The cycle perpetuates generationally. Children who witness adult boundaries being crossed learn their own boundaries don't matter, and that violating others' boundaries is normal if you love them. "We pass down boundary issues like unwanted heirlooms," Dr. Jordan said. Children who watch their mother endure her mother-in-law's control tactics learn that's what adult relationships look like. Breaking this cycle requires recognizing the family free pass as a psychological trap created by outdated survival mechanisms, cultural programming, and fear of rejection. Healthy relationships, including family relationships, require mutual respect and clear boundaries. People often fear setting boundaries will destroy family relationships, Dr. Hat Chen noted. But the opposite is true. Respectful boundaries create conditions for genuine closeness. You can't truly connect with someone you silently resent. The experts suggest starting with awareness, simply noticing when you're giving family members a pass you wouldn't extend to others. Would you let a coworker comment on your weight? Would you let a neighbor discipline your child? The empathy sandwich technique. Option 3 feels like the winner here. After years of letting relatives trample all over your boundaries, the thought of finally standing up for yourself can feel more terrifying than skydiving into a volcano. Your mind races with worst-case scenarios: the crying, the guilt trips, the silent treatment that lasts until 2037. But what if I told you psychology experts have discovered a communication technique so effective at diffusing boundary battles, it's like having a secret superpower in family showdowns? Let me share what happened when my friend Jamie finally used this technique with his mother-in-law, who kept rearranging his furniture during visits. Mom, I appreciate how much you care about making our home comfortable. When furniture gets moved without discussion, it disrupts our household routine. Steady voice. I'd love your decorating insights if we could talk about changes before making them. His mother-in-law paused, nodded, and actually asked before moving things during her next visit. No tears, no drama, just a small breakthrough that changed their relationship. This approach is called the empathy sandwich technique, a structured way to deliver difficult messages that works particularly well within emotionally charged family settings. Think of it as packaging your boundaries so it's received rather than rejected. The technique has 3 simple layers. 1. Begin with empathy. Acknowledge their positive intent or feelings. 2. State your clear, firm boundary in the middle. 3. End with another dose of empathy that reaffirms the relationship. Compare this to what typically happens in boundary confrontations. Picture Martha's daughter-in-law after the cookie incident. You deliberately put nuts in those cookies when you knew Noah has an allergy. You could have sent him to the hospital. Martha's face hardens. I would never hurt my grandson. I raised 3 children without all these modern allergies. You young parents are just overprotective. And suddenly we've got a family meltdown with hurt feelings, defensive reactions, and 0 progress on the boundary issue. Using the empathy sandwich instead might sound like, I know you love making special treats for the kids. We can't have nuts in our house because of Noah's allergy boundary. I'd love for you to share your baking talents in ways that are safe for them. The boundary remains clear, but it's cushioned in a way that acknowledges Martha's intentions, while offering a path forward. This works because the empathy layers bypass defensive reactions. Starting and ending positively maintains connection while addressing problematic behavior, crucial when dealing with in-laws, where maintaining family harmony often feels like navigating a minefield blindfolded. Several pitfalls can cause this technique to fail. Being vague about your boundary leaves too much room for interpretation. I'd prefer if you didn't bring certain foods is much weaker than, we cannot have any nuts in our house due to Noah's allergy. Skipping the empathy layers defeats the purpose. You're back to direct confrontation. Using insincere empathy, I know you think you're helping, but makes things worse by sounding condescending. Inconsistent enforcement teaches the boundary crosser that persistence pays off. If you give in just this once, you're signaling they just need to push harder next time. When done properly, this approach transforms relationships. Sarah, whose mother-in-law constantly criticized her parenting in front of the children, finally tried. I know you want the best for your grandchildren. When parenting decisions are questioned in front of the kids, it undermines their sense of security. I'd really value your insights if we could discuss concerns privately. The result wasn't immediate, but gradually the public criticisms decreased. Eventually, her mother-in-law began requesting private conversations for concerns. Both felt respected, even during disagreements. This technique creates space for connection while protecting necessary boundaries. It acknowledges that most family members genuinely believe they're acting out of love, even when their actions cause harm. Your first attempts might feel awkward. You might stumble over words or forget the 3rd layer when emotions run high. That's normal. Like any skill, it requires practice to incorporate into your natural communication. Before your next family boundary moment, try planning your empathy sandwich. Write down your specific boundary, then craft genuine empathetic statements that acknowledge positive intentions and affirm your commitment to the relationship. When words fail, legal boundaries and hard limits. Option 2 feels like the strongest here. Let's face it, Sometimes all the carefully crafted empathy in the world still hits a brick wall of entitlement. I've seen cases where the mother-in-law responded to boundaries by secretly picking kids up from school without permission or deliberately exposing them to allergens they were told to avoid. At some point, you have to ask yourself, when do you stop asking nicely and bring in the legal big guns? Parents have nearly absolute authority over who gets to see their children. That fancy, world's best grandma mug? Legally meaningless. Those 20 years of Christmas dinners? The law doesn't care. When push comes to shove, parents hold all the cards in deciding who interacts with their minor children and under what conditions. Carla, a mother of 2 from Ohio, experienced this firsthand when implementing what experts call the escalation ladder, a series of increasingly formal boundaries. My mother-in-law refused to believe our daughter's gluten sensitivity was real. After the 3rd accidental exposure that left Sophie sick for days, we had to make the hardest decision of our lives. They started with verbal warnings, moved to detailed written expectations, then restricted visits to supervised only. When those failed, they sent a formal letter through their attorney. The letter was our last attempt before cutting contact completely, Carla said, her voice breaking. I never imagined we'd need lawyers involved in our family relationships. Attorney Jessica Winters, who specializes in family law, confirmed this approach. The escalation ladder provides multiple opportunities for cooperation before taking more drastic measures. Most family members will respond before reaching the final rungs. Many grandparents operate under the misconception that they have inherent legal rights to their grandchildren. The reality is that in most jurisdictions, parents have comprehensive authority to determine who has access to their children, barring extraordinary circumstances. But what happens when they don't respond? That's where the hard truth comes in. Sometimes the healthiest option is to cut contact entirely. Dr. Rachel Morgan, a trauma specialist, refers to this as estrangement as protection. She explains, when someone repeatedly demonstrates they cannot respect fundamental safety boundaries, especially regarding children, continued contact can cause more harm than good. Estrangement isn't about punishment, it's about protection. This extends beyond physical safety. Dr. Morgan describes cases where grandparents engage in parental alienation, systematic attempts to undermine a parent's authority. We see grandparents telling children their parents' rules are stupid, that mom and dad don't really love them as much as grandma does, or that they shouldn't have to listen to their parents. These dynamics create profound confusion in children caught in the middle. 9-year-old Zach expressed the devastating impact. I don't know who to believe anymore. Grandma says mom is making up rules to be mean, but then I get in trouble when I go home. Everyone's always mad. The emotional toll of taking legal steps against family is immense. Mark, a father from California, described the guilt that accompanied his decision to obtain a restraining order against his own mother. It felt like I was betraying her, even though she was the one who refused to stop undermining our parenting. The lawyer advised us it was our only option after she took our son to get his ears pierced against our explicit instructions. Attorney Winters emphasizes that legal intervention should be the last resort, but sometimes it's necessary. I've seen cases where grandparents have called CPS with false reports, spread rumors about the parent's fitness, or attempted to gain custody based on fabricated concerns. These are situations where formal legal boundaries become essential. For those facing these difficult decisions, experts recommend documenting everything. Keep a log of boundary violations with dates, times, and specific actions. Save text messages, emails, and voicemails that demonstrate the pattern. This documentation becomes crucial if legal intervention becomes necessary. Legal boundaries don't necessarily mean permanent estrangement, Attorney Winters clarified. Sometimes the shock of formal legal notice creates the wake-up call needed. I've seen families successfully rebuild relationships after a period of strictly enforced boundaries, but only when the boundary crosser takes responsibility and demonstrates consistent change. Dr. Morgan adds that professional support is essential. Working with a family therapist can help parents navigate the complex emotions involved in setting hard boundaries with family. The guilt, grief, and fear can be overwhelming without proper support. Lauren, who restricted her mother's access after repeated allergy exposures, offered this advice. Trust your instincts. If someone has shown repeatedly they won't respect your boundaries about your child's safety, believe them. Your first responsibility is to your child, not to an adult's feelings. United we stand, the power of the parental team. Safety begins at home, but so does your defensive strategy. Think your boundary-crossing in-law is just being difficult? What if they're actually playing chess while you're playing checkers? The manipulation tactic called triangulation has destroyed stronger marriages than yours, but there's a surprisingly simple way to neutralize it before it takes root. Watch what happens when unity changes the game. Imagine a split screen showing two very different family scenes. On the left, there's Martha cornering her son Robert while his wife is out of the room. "Your wife is being ridiculous about those cookies," she whispers. "Noah barely had a rash. When you were little, you ate everything and turned out fine." Robert looks uncomfortable, but nods slightly. When his wife returns and mentions the allergy incident, Robert stays silent, avoiding eye contact. On the right side of our screen, the same setup unfolds with a crucial difference. When Martha makes her ridiculous comment, Robert immediately replies, "Mom, we both decided on Noah's allergy protocols together. This isn't negotiable." The look on Martha's face? Priceless. She backs down immediately. The difference between these scenarios centers on what family therapists consider the ultimate kryptonite against manipulation: a united parental front. When in-laws sense any daylight between parents' positions, that's where they'll drive the wedge, explains a family therapist who's studied these dynamics for years. This divide-and-conquer approach is a calculated move in what we call triangulation. Triangulation happens when someone, like an intrusive in-law, positions themselves as an ally to one partner while subtly undermining the other. Before you know it, you're fighting each other instead of addressing the actual boundary violation. Your husband doesn't mind if I take the kids for ice cream. Your wife is too strict with them. You used to be fun before she changed you. These are tactical strikes designed to create conflict between you and your partner. I've seen couples who started out rock solid gradually turn against each other, with one partner constantly defending their parent instead of supporting their spouse. Every family dinner becomes a diplomatic crisis, with everyone walking on eggshells and resentment building to explosive levels. The good news? This manipulation only works when you let it. Let's watch effective responses that shut down triangulation attempts. Martha, Robert, tell your wife the children need some sugar in their diet. They're growing. Ineffective response. Robert looks uncomfortable and says nothing, leaving his wife to be the bad guy. Effective response. Mom, we decided together on the kids' nutrition. This isn't up for debate. Another example. Martha, when wife is absent, I got Noah a little treat. Don't tell his mother. You know how she overreacts. Ineffective response. Okay, just this once. Effective response. I need to discuss this with my wife first. We don't keep secrets about the kids. The responses that work emphasize partnership and collaboration between spouses. According to research, the biological child has a special responsibility in these situations. The most effective intervention comes from the adult child of the offending parent. When a mother-in-law hears boundaries from her own child rather than her child's spouse, she's significantly more likely to respect those boundaries, the family therapist notes. There's a primal recognition there that's hard to ignore. This doesn't mean the in-law spouse should stay silent. The key is coordination. Couples who successfully navigate these challenges discuss boundary issues privately first, agree on a unified approach, and present that united front consistently. Some couples have developed actual scripts for predictable situations. We appreciate your input, but we've already decided this as a couple. That doesn't work for our family. We'll think about your suggestion and let you know what we decide. These responses reinforce that the couple makes decisions together. One particularly effective tactic is what therapists call taking a pause. When an in-law makes a boundary-pushing request, simply saying, "Let me check with spouse and get back to you," prevents you from being maneuvered into making solo decisions. I interviewed a couple who transformed their relationship with overly involved parents by implementing their check-in rule. Nothing was decided on the spot when it came to the kids or household. Everything got a "we'll discuss and let you know" response. Within months, both sets of parents stopped trying to play them against each other. Of course, this assumes both partners are committed to the same boundaries. When one partner doesn't see the problem with their parent's behavior, professional help may be needed. A good family therapist can help couples identify unhealthy patterns and develop joint strategies. The bottom line is powerful. The strongest defense against boundary violations is two parents standing shoulder to shoulder, like an unbreakable fortress protecting the family within. No manipulative force can breach walls built with unity and mutual respect, healing the boundary wounds. Once those boundaries have been trampled beyond recognition, most people assume the relationship is basically toast. But what if I told you that some of the most toxic in-law relationships have actually transformed into healthy ones? The path to healing isn't what most people think, and it certainly isn't about forgiving and forgetting. I'm sitting across from a family in our studio who experienced a remarkable transformation. The Wilsons, who once had what Diane describes as the mother-in-law from hell, now enjoy Sunday dinners together without conflict erupting. "I honestly didn't think repair was possible," says Diane Wilson, glancing at her mother-in-law Barbara. "After the birthday party incident, I was ready to walk away forever." Barbara nods solemnly. "I couldn't see what I was doing back then. I was so convinced I was right that I couldn't hear what my son and Diane were actually saying." What's the difference between relationships that heal and those that permanently fracture? Dr. Amanda Taylor, a family reconciliation specialist, explains that the repair process requires real action, not just time passing. True reconciliation requires 4 non-negotiable elements, Dr. Taylor tells me. First, the boundary crosser must genuinely acknowledge the wrongdoing, recognizing the violation. Second, a sincere apology that takes full responsibility. Third, a commitment to change behavior that's demonstrated consistently. And finally, time, because trust can only be rebuilt through repeated experiences of respect. The crucial factor? All parties must be willing participants. You can't force someone to acknowledge wrongdoing, Dr. Taylor says. That's why some relationships simply can't heal. Consider Martha, our cookie-baking grandmother who triggered Noah's allergic reaction. Her journey from boundary crosser to boundary respecter offers hope for families caught in toxic cycles. After the cookie incident, Martha initially doubled down, insisting she knew best about allergies. But something unexpected happened during a family therapy session. The therapist asked Noah to draw a picture of how he felt when he got the rash, Martha recalls, her voice cracking. He drew himself with tears and wrote "scared," and nobody believes me. That's when it hit me. I was teaching him his feelings didn't matter. This breakthrough moment didn't instantly fix everything. The family implemented what Dr. Taylor calls earned trust, a period where Martha had supervised access only and had to demonstrate consistent respect for boundaries. Many boundary crossers resist these restrictions, Dr. Taylor explains. They feel entitled to immediate forgiveness and full access, but earned trust is essential for healing. The person who violated trust must accept that rebuilding happens gradually through consistent respect. The success stories highlight specific moments when the dynamic fundamentally changed, what therapists call relationship pivot points. For Martha, seeing Noah's drawing created emotional understanding that logic alone hadn't achieved. Therapy approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy help identify unhelpful thought patterns and replace them with healthier alternatives. Many boundary crossers genuinely believe they're helping, explains Dr. Rose Chen, who specializes in family estrangement. They need tools to recognize how their help causes harm and strategies to redirect their good intentions in truly supportive ways. Dr. Chen emphasizes that even when family members refuse therapy together, individual therapy can still transform relationships. One person changing their approach can break the cycle of toxic interactions. The journey toward healing often means challenging our deepest beliefs about family obligation and worthiness. When we recognize that boundaries are acts of self-respect rather than rejection, we create the possibility for authentic connection. Dr. Taylor offers an important caution. Not all relationships can or should be saved. In cases of deliberate, repeated harm, where the person shows no remorse or willingness to change, reconciliation may not be possible or advisable, she says firmly. Sometimes the healthiest option is to maintain distance. For those hoping to rebuild a damaged relationship, experts recommend starting with clear, specific requests rather than general complaints. Instead of saying "you never respect me," try "I need you to ask before picking the kids up from school," suggests Dr. Taylor. Concrete behaviors are easier to change than attitudes. She also stresses the importance of acknowledging progress. When boundary crossers make positive changes, recognition reinforces that behavior. Martha needed to hear when she got it right, not just when she got it wrong. 6 months after the cookie incident, Martha baked a completely nut-free birthday cake for Noah. She showed me every ingredient before she started, her daughter-in-law recalls, and she made sure Noah knew she was following Mom's safety rules. That simple act of respect meant everything. The most surprising insight from families who've successfully repaired relationships? The process of boundary setting and reconciliation actually created deeper, more authentic connections than they had before. "We never had a real relationship when I was just appeasing her," Diane Wilson admits. "Now that we've done the hard work of being honest with each other, there's actual respect between us. It's not perfect, but it's real." So we've come full circle in our little family saga. When children see parents consistently maintain healthy boundaries, they're learning something priceless, that respect isn't optional but essential. They're watching how you protect what matters, even when it's uncomfortable. Research shows that families with clear, well-defined boundaries experience less conflict and greater emotional closeness. Creating a foundation where everyone feels secure enough to thrive strengthens family bonds. Remember, the greatest inheritance you're giving your children is the blueprint for healthy relationships, a structure they'll build upon for generations. By setting boundaries today,